Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, November 22nd. Ambassador Chas Freeman is here with us. Welcome back, Ambassador.
Glad to be with you, Nima.
Let's get started with the decision of ICC with the arrest warrant for Netanyahu and Gallant. And here is what Netanyahu said to respond to that decision.
Decision of the International Court in The Hague is a modern Dreyfus trial, and it will end the same way. 130 years ago, the French Jewish officer Alfred Dreyfus was falsely accused of treason by a biased French court. In response to these false accusations, the great French writer Émile Zola wrote his monumental essay, J'accuse. He accused the French court of anti-Semitic lies against an innocent officer who was later exonerated of all guilt. Now an international court in The Hague, also headed by a French judge, is repeating this outrageous offense. It is falsely accusing me, the democratically elected Prime Minister of the State of Israel, and Israel's former Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, of deliberately targeting civilians. This when we do everything in our power to avoid civilian casualties. We issue millions of text messages, phone calls, leaflets to the citizens of Gaza to get them out of harm's way, while the Hamas terrorists do everything in their power to keep them in harm's way, including shooting them, using them as human shields. The court in The Hague accuses us of a deliberate policy of starvation. This when we've supplied Gaza with 700,000 tons of food to feed the people of Gaza. That's 3,200 calories for every man, woman, and child in Gaza. And these supplies are routinely looted by Hamas terrorists who deprive their people of much-needed food. Yet just in the last few weeks, Israel facilitated the vaccination of 97% of the people of Gaza against polio. This doesn't prevent the court of accusing us of genocide. What in God's name are they talking about in The Hague? The truth is simple. No war is more just than the war that Israel has been waging in Gaza after Hamas attacked us unprovoked, launching the worst massacre against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. The decision to issue an arrest warrant against me, the democratically elected Prime Minister of the State of Israel, and our former Defense Minister, was made by a rogue prosecutor who's trying to extricate himself from sexual harassment charges, and by biased judges who are motivated by anti-Semitic sentiments against the one and only Jewish state. These judges did nothing. They did nothing against the real war crimes committed against the millions who've been murdered or uprooted by the dictatorships in Iran, Syria, and Yemen. Instead, they falsely accused the one democracy in the Middle East, Israel, thereby imperiling the right of all democracies to defend themselves against murderous terrorists and tyrants. Nor did the court do anything against the Hamas terrorists who raped our women, beheaded our men, burned babies alive in front of their parents, and kidnapped hundreds of men, women, and children to the underground dungeons of Gaza. They're still holding 101 hostages, citizens of many lands, including the United States. Come to think of it, the court did issue one arrest warrant against Hamas. Now hear this. They issued an arrest warrant against the corpse of the Hamas arch-terrorist Mohammed Dev. His corpse. What an absurdity. No biased anti-Israel decision in The Hague will prevent the State of Israel from defending its citizens. And I want to thank our many friends around the world, especially those in the United States, who've condemned this outrage and who have said that this decision will have severe consequences for the ICC and those who cooperate with its decision. Israel will not recognize the validity of this decision. We will continue to do everything we must do to defend our citizens and defend our state against Iran's axis of terror, Iran and its terrorist proxies, which include Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and others. Our enemies are your enemies, and our victory will be your victory, the victory of civilization over barbarism and tyranny.
Where to start? That is the most monumental list of lies and repetitions of baseless propaganda that I think I've ever heard in my life. And it is, of course, important to note that it was spoken in English, American English, directed at the United States, which I'm sorry to say is now at war with international law. If you look at what the congressional reactions or the White House reactions to this fully justified issue of warrants for to hold Mr. Netanyahu, Mr. Gallant accountable for their actions, which have murdered tens of thousands of people and destroyed the lives of a couple of million people in Gaza, turning Gaza into Auschwitz by the sea, live streamed all over the world. Apparently, in my own country, people are not aware of what is happening because of censorship, self-censorship by the media. But I think this will simply accelerate the isolation of Israel, and if the United States, true to form, stands with Israel, the United States. So that was probably a very effective effort to manipulate American politics, and we will pay a price for it. So will Israel. Israel at this point has no admirers, and I didn't take notes on everything that the Prime Minister said, but I do know that Israel is not a democracy for at least half of the people under its control. It is a tyranny. Israel is not innocent of mass murder. It has not been supplying food. I think it has outlawed UNRWA, which was the mechanism for supplying food and medicines to the Palestinians. It has turned Gaza into a mountain of rubble. It has murdered children and women disproportionately in Gaza. It's now doing the same thing in Lebanon. And it's an outlaw, and not surprising, therefore, that when the rule of law is asserted to hold Israel accountable, the reaction is we don't recognize the law. We don't recognize the court. We will continue to do what we want to do, regardless of any standard of morality or law. This is absolutely, if Israelis are outraged by the court decision, which they are very self-righteous. They believe they can do no wrong. Everything that happens to them justifies their victimhood. And they use this charge of anti-Semitism promiscuously to smear anybody who criticizes them. They go beyond that. The pressure on Karim Khan was huge. One of the judges in the original tribunal considering the arrest warrants resigned under threat. We have a long record of Israeli smears, character assassination. So we get a charge against Karim Khan of sexual harassment. Where did that come from? Is there any basis to it? Most likely there isn't. But it is no coincidence that it comes now. And a final point I'd like to make is Mr. Netanyahu says he's speaking for the Jewish people. He is not. He is speaking for Israelis. And his equation of his position as Prime Minister of Israel with being the Pope of Judaism is preposterous. And by doing this, he turns every Jew in the world into a human shield for genocide and for behavior that is completely despicable. And he threatens them with a rise of anti-Semitism, which he thinks is a good thing because it corroborates his narrative. And more to the point, it makes people afraid and want to move to Israel, although that is the least safe place in the world for Jews. So my reaction to this is one of outrage at his outrage, which is entirely hypocritical. You're muted, Nima.
We had two types of reaction to this decision on the part of ICC. We had the European Union. Here is Joseph Borrell talking about this.
That has to stop. And now I will be very sober in my comment. It is not a political decision. It is a decision of a court of justice, of the International Court of Justice. And the decision of the court has to be respected and implemented. So I take note of the decision of the International Criminal Court to issue arrest warrants from Prime Minister Netanyahu, the former Minister of Defense, Mr. Gallant, and the Hamas leaders, Dave. This decision is a binding decision, and all states parties of the court, which include all members of the European Union, are binding to implement this court decision.
And on the other hand, we had the reaction from Mike Waltz, the next national security advisor to Donald Trump. And he said there has no credibility for this decision and nobody would care about this decision. And here is Tom Cotton. It's so important when you look at these two tweets from 2022 and right now 2024. He's talking about Putin being a war criminal with what has happened in Ukraine. And right now he's condemning ICC for the decision they've made on Israel. We are witnessing a totally double standard when it comes to the international affairs, to the international issues that we're witnessing right now. How do you put these two pictures? Are the Europeans able to resist the pressure coming from, we know that the Trump administration would put pressure on them. How do you see that?
Well, I think we see bills introduced in the Congress to sanction the members of the court and the court itself. I presume that means to prevent them from coming to the United States, because I don't think they can do maybe doing something to any investments they have in the United States. But I think this is pretty weak. And I go back to what I said earlier. The United States is now at war with international law, in addition to complicit in genocide. And by the way, the warrants and the decisions which they rest on directly accuse the United States of complicity in the Israeli actions, which are clearly documented, and Israeli statements, including by Yoav Gallant, the former defense minister, made it very clear that the starvation is being used as a weapon of war. It's very clear that the rules of engagement in Gaza include to killing anything that moves. We now see in northern Gaza the creation of a free fire zone in which anyone who is present is fair game. We have watched, as I said, this has been live streamed. It's as though the entire Nazi Holocaust had been live streamed. And we're supposed to sit here and do nothing about that? I mean, I would like to think that the people that, that if I had been alive, if you had been alive at the time of the Holocaust, we would have taken effective action to prevent it if we knew about it. Israel's not concealed its replication of the Holocaust. And I find it terribly distressing as an American that my country, which of course is not perfect and has committed many crimes of its own over the years, championed the creation of international law, especially the laws of the Nuremberg trials and the legislation, international legislation, in the form of conventions, treaties that outlawed all of the sorts of behavior that Israel is now demonstrably guilty of, that we would stand behind the criminal. So perhaps this has something to do with why Mr. Netanyahu clearly is a war criminal, Mr. Gallant, who clearly was a war, acting criminally while in office. And Israel, which is behaving in a manner that the world finds utterly unacceptable and criminal in nature. Perhaps it's ironic that we have elected a felon as president. This is unprecedented in every sense. And we have been experiencing the progressive isolation of the United States on a series of issues. This is probably the most grave because what it demonstrates is that the so-called rules-based order that we have been advocating in recent years is really an edict-based order. That is, it is the exercise of a kind of anti-international law dictatorship through the issuing of edicts called rules. But the rules that we all agreed on no longer are respected. This is grave damage to the future of the entire world, not just to us. So the other issues that we are being isolated upon are, of course, the Ukraine war, where the bulk of the world does not agree with our position. I'm sorry, there's sunlight coming in the window, so it'll go away, I guess.
No problem.
But it's fairly early in the morning, and the trees here have lost their leaves. Anyway, Ukraine, and of course, we just had the conference on climate change at Baku in Azerbaijan, at which the United States handed leadership of the issue to China by defaulting. Mr. Trump says he's going to once again repudiate the Paris Accords and focus on doing more drilling for hydrocarbons and not worry about, and also, of course, cancel subsidies to electric vehicles. Very conveniently now that Mr. Musk has pocketed all of those subsidies and will be left in a monopoly position in the electric vehicle market in the United States, as well as having a substantial position in the Chinese market. So we are becoming very, very isolated, and we don't seem to recognize that. And like the Israelis, we don't recognize the moral and legal issues with our position.
When you look at Netanyahu and his character for many years, when it comes to the war in Iraq, in Syria, and what's going on, for many years he was manipulating the foreign policy of the United States. And why there is nobody in the United States considering in the power who are making those decisions, who are the masters of decisions in the United States, or they're not considering that this guy is not helping us, it's just damaging us. Because
well, I think he's an extremely skillful politician. Obviously, he's been Prime Minister of Israel on numerous occasions, despite the fact that many Israelis loathe him and regard him correctly as duplicitous, dishonest, immoral, egotistical, focused only on his own interests rather than those of the country. But he is a master manipulator, as you suggest. And I would explain the performance of the American political elite in two terms. One is bribery and corruption. Basically, our legislators and our politicians generally have their hands out, and they are venal, they are corruptible, and they have been corrupted. That is one reason. Another is a much less criminal sort of reason, and that is we've been brainwashed. Our media do not report much of what is going on. This is, however, been challenged now by the emergence of social media, which report directly. And so we have in the United States, this is a challenge to the media monopoly, the official narrative which has taken hold in our country on Israel and other issues, including the war with Russia and Ukraine. It refutes these things. And that is why in the United States there has been such a move to ban TikTok, which has become a major news source, particularly for young people. I don't myself use social media, but I think it is mainly the coverage of Gaza and the revelations that TikTok has provided, many of them by Israeli soldiers documenting their own criminal behavior gleefully. That this has changed the atmosphere with regard to Israel, and we now have a very significant phenomenon, which is Bernie Sanders putting forward a resolution of disapproval in the Senate for arms transfers to Israel and garnering 20 votes. That's 20% of the Senate. This is unprecedented. Basically, Israel has tried to portray reality in such unrealistic terms that it has exhausted the patience of even its devoted supporters, previously devoted supporters in the Senate. And as Mr. Sanders has pointed out, Senator Sanders, the vast majority of the American people oppose arms transfers to Israel. It is the political elite which has been bought and which is happy in its delusions that continues to approve these arms transfers and general support for Israel, regardless of what it does. It is all very reminiscent of Mr. Trump's famous statement that if he shot someone on Fifth Avenue, nothing would happen to him. There is here a kind of impunity that has corrupted the soul of Israel, which began, one may differ on whether it was appropriate for the United Nations to sponsor a Jewish state in Palestine at all. You know, why weren't the Jews, who were terrible victims of the Nazis in World War II, given Bavaria? That would have been more appropriate. But anyway, Israel was established in Palestine, and in its early days, it was really quite admirable. It had its pioneering spirit. It had a sense of pursuit of justice. It was developing the land and the agriculture there beyond the level that it had previously been developed, and it became a brilliant center of innovation for the world. All of that has been squandered by the blatant genocide and other crimes of the Netanyahu cabinet.
How do you see repercussions of this decision in the Middle East, in the West Asia, considering Turkey or Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think I have to say that the Turks have made a tremendous effort over decades to conform to European Union standards. The European Union accession process has changed Turkey, much for the better, in my view. However, on this issue, I think the Turks will part company with many other Europeans. Mr. Borrell came rather lately to the conclusion that the law should be applied to Israel. He has been characteristically, we say, waffling. He's been inconstant. He's been vague in his previous treatment of this issue. As time has gone on, he's become clearer. And of course, he's absolutely right. This is an obligation. Implementing these warrants, is an obligation of every European Union member, all of whom have joined the International Criminal Court, which the United States has not, despite the fact that in many ways it was our idea. So the problem is that the European Union, as we know, is much less than the sum of its parts. And its parts, the independent countries within Europe, are all reacting in different ways. So you have You have, countries like France, countries like the United Kingdom, now a member of the EU, or most particularly Germany, Germany has been a major advocate for respect for international law, in part out of contrition for its violations of international law in the run-up to World War II and during the war. It now faces a dilemma. It is a member of the International Criminal Court. It purports to be a champion of the rule of law. What is it going to do? I think Mr. Borrell is right. Germany has a requirement to implement these warrants. Will it do so? I'm not sure. So I think the reactions in Europe vary. In Turkey, of course, has already broken relations with Israel on precisely this issue. The Saudis have made it clear that they will not normalize relations with Israel without a Palestinian state, which the Knesset in Israel, the parliament, has enacted legislation to prohibit. It's very clear that the Israelis have no intention of coexisting with Palestinians in Palestine. They want to they want to complete the ethnic cleansing they began in the mid-20th century. And if they can't drive Palestinians out, they will murder them. And we see this going on now in the West Bank, where Bezalel Smotrich, who has proclaimed himself the Governor General of the West Bank, and who is the finance minister, says, now this is the time to carry out an annexation. I don't think anybody in the world, except possibly my country, would recognize that annexation. So what Israel is doing is creating a vast international coalition against it, and making itself unwelcome in any international forum, and it's taking the United States with it.
We had 2 days ago, we had an article in the New York Times. It shows that the Israelis are failing to achieve anything in the southern part of Lebanon. And that's why the Biden administration is trying to do some sort of talks between Lebanese and Israelis to bring some sort of ceasefire between them. Do you think that the Biden administration would achieve that in its final days in power in Washington?
No, for the simple reason that Israel insists on a free hand unilaterally to enforce whatever agreement there is, if there is an agreement. And I don't think there will be an agreement because of that. Hezbollah is a patriotic nationalist movement with pride in Lebanese sovereignty. Anybody in Lebanon who agrees that Israel can bomb and strafe Lebanon at will is going to be regarded as a traitor. And you see this very clearly in the pronouncements of Nabi Berri and other political figures in Lebanon. Meanwhile, on the ground, it looks like the Israelis are experiencing some kind of reenactment of their defeat by Hezbollah in 2006. And there, I think, we have to recognize that even in devoutly Sunni anti-Hezbollah, anti-Shia environments like Saudi Arabia at the time, Nasrallah became a national hero. And, particularly, obviously different regions in Saudi Arabia differed in terms of their admiration for Nasrallah, and the Saudi government continued to be anti-Hezbollah. But I think Hezbollah's effective resistance to the Israeli invasion and the destruction of much of southern Lebanon by Israel in an air war will be to stand with Hezbollah. So Mr. Netanyahu, in his statement of outrage about the court decision, by the way, it was a court decision carefully arrived at after hearing evidence. It wasn't some sort of out of the blue thing. It took 6 months for the warrants actually to be issued. I think Mr. Netanyahu, in speaking of Iran and its, the axis of resistance, doesn't seem to realize that he is creating an axis of resistance all his own. He is expanding the support for the so-called axis of resistance. And meanwhile, he is succeeding in labeling those roughly 15 countries that in the West that stand with Israel as a kind of axis of inhumanity, which is unacceptable to the global majority and to most Western publics. Because here we have another example of the alienation of the leadership in Western countries from the populace. The populace in the United States, as I mentioned, does not want to support these actions by Israel in any way. And yet the political class ignores popular opinion and proceeds. And this is a reproach to democracy, not an affirmation of it.
One of the main reasons that many of leaders in the world are not agreeing with Donald Trump on many issues is he's unpredictable. We cannot predict his actions. And when we look at the behavior of the Biden administration so far, it was the same way. It was totally unpredictable. They were talking about not sending tanks to Ukraine, not sending missiles, fighter jets. They sent all of these weapons to Ukraine. And the latest escalation was they decided to let Ukraine use ATACMS, missiles to strike deep into the Russian soil. And we had the response coming from Russia. How do you find the situation of the war in Ukraine and the way that the Biden administration trying to escalate this? We've learned from Olaf Scholz. He says that this is in response to Russian attack, that they use a hypersonic missile to hit Ukraine. And he said it's a frightening escalation. Your take?
Well, it is a counter-escalation, of course, and it is a warning to the West because there is no defense against those missiles. And I think the Russians went out of their way to point out that that missile is nuclear capable. They did not put a nuclear warhead on it this time, but there is no defense against this. And it is therefore an illustration of the risk which is rising, that war in Eastern Europe will become a European-wide war or maybe even a transatlantic war. So that's all very clear. I think we have to look at what the Biden administration is attempting here. And there was a very revealing statement by Jake Sullivan, the outgoing national security advisor to Mr. Biden, when he said exactly as you did that, we have given Ukraine everything they asked for. Maybe we were a little cautious in doing that, but they got everything. And each thing that we transferred was portrayed as a decisive aid to Ukrainian victory. And none of these things, M1, A2 tanks, various kinds of armored personnel carriers, artillery, F-16s, ATACMS, has turned the tide militarily. And by the implication of this is there is no military justification for what Mr. Biden has just announced. It is not going to change the course of the battle. It is only going to produce counter-escalation from Russia. It will not help Ukraine seize victory from the jaws of defeat. And so what is it? It is a political move. What is the purpose? The purpose is to keep Ukraine from decisively losing until Mr. Trump comes in office. So he has to deal with Ukraine's defeat. And to this same end, the United States, which had declined to provide anti-personnel mines, automatic ones, ones that are triggered by an approaching person, to Ukraine, has now decided to transfer those. And true to form, the United States, which has been acting as Lone Ranger. If you remember, the Lone Ranger has a faithful Indian companion called Tonto, which in Spanish means stupid, and that is Britain. Britain has played the role of Tonto, a stupid, I guess you say torto in Portuguese, but it is following rather than leading. And so much for the alleged role of Britain in the special relationship between the United States and Britain, in which Britain has prided itself on playing the role of the wise Greeks to the powerful Romans, counseling the United States, aggregating American power to its own, and in effect leading the United States on issues. There's no more leadership from Britain. It is now acting very much like a vassal state of the United States. And if I were British, I would be humiliated by that, just as I am humiliated as an American by the ability of Israel to cause my country to take steps which are so obviously not in its interest.
In the eyes of the former foreign minister of Ukraine, he says that the West wanted us to be defeated. They wanted Russia to defeat us. Here is what he said. It's totally different from what we've seen, from what we've heard from even Jake Sullivan.
The West wants Ukraine to win in this war, but at the same time, it does not want Russia to lose the war because of the possible repercussions of that loss for stability of Russia and Eurasian region.
That's a contradictory position.
Yeah, this is why we are where we are. It's not a contradictory. This is exactly why we are where we are.
But you're saying that the West doesn't want Russia to lose the war?
Yes, I'm saying that with absolute confidence because the West is afraid that the loss of Russia in this war will mean the disintegration of Russia and all the consequences related to weapons dissemination and chaos and humanitarian crisis that this loss may lead to. And but this, you're absolutely right. This is the contradictory strategy. You pump help to Ukraine. You want Ukraine to succeed and to remain democratic country and part of the West, but at the same time you are not doing anything meaningful to significantly and irreversibly undermine Russia's capacity to fight the war. I want to be clear. I'm grateful for our Western.
What's meaningful? What else West can do for Ukraine?
Well, it's very interesting. I think he's wrong about the reasons for Western caution, American caution. I think that has to do with the chance that Russian nuclear doctrine would dictate if Russia was losing, if the sort of scenario you mentioned, that is the Russia falling apart into independent republics, were to occur. This would, under Russian nuclear doctrine, justify its resort to nuclear weapons. And I think that has been the main inhibition on Western confrontations with Russia. So I think he's wrong about that. Having said that, ironically, contrary to what he said, there are people in the West who really would like to see Russia broken up into a number of smaller countries, which then could be played off against each other. And Russia would disappear as a geopolitical actor on the global level, which it is. And I think for that very reason, the so-called global South, or the global majority, if you will, don't want Russia to lose, because without Russia, there is no geopolitical balance. They need, they want to have a multipolar, they call it. I call it multinodal, They want to have a multinodal international system in which there is no hegemon, there is no duopoly of the sort that Brzezinski imagined of China and the United States running the world. I don't think the Chinese were ever interested in that, and I'm sure that it's not feasible. But the world's countries want space to maneuver, and that only can come if there is a Russian counter to American hegemony, as well as a Chinese counter, an Indian counter, and countries like Iran or Turkey, middle-ranking powers, if you will, have a degree of independence that they did not have during the Cold War, when you had essentially two competing feudal orders, overlords with vassals or subordinates, maybe willing subordinates, who defined their position in the world by reference to the overlords. They were either in one camp or the other, or they were trying to stay out of both camps. But in any event, that was really a very feudal kind of order, and it's gone. And I think most countries want it to disappear faster than it is. You're muted, Nima.
I think from what we've seen so far, for the future, we need some sort of arm control treaties as we had before. And Putin mentioned in his talk, in his speech right after this attack on Ukraine, he has mentioned the United States destroying the missile treaty in 2019, which Donald Trump was responsible for that. Here is what he said.
Mistake on the part of the United States to destroy the system that was established by the missile treaty in 2019. We see that the United States and their allies are now considering and has successfully tested their capabilities to deploy advanced missile systems in different parts of the world, and their exercises routinely include the use of such weapons. Russia has unilaterally refused to deploy intermediate and small-range missiles until we see similar weapons deployed by the United States in a region of the world. The use of the novel system, which was essentially an operational test, was carried out in response to the decisions made by the United States and their allies. And the further actions will be considered and decided based on what we see from them.
Yeah.
There are quite a few comments that come to mind. One is that is a very defensive statement, saying that Russian policies and decisions will come in reaction to those of the United States and American allies. Second, I think it is a great shame, it is a tragedy, in fact, that the whole arms control fabric that we created with such difficulty during the Cold War between Moscow and Washington and other capitals has now disappeared. We could have built on that framework, possibly, to create a new and expanded system that would have limited the nuclear dimension, at least, of confrontations throughout the world. India and Pakistan, for example, Israel and Iran, North and South Korea. South Korea is, I think, now very likely to acquire nuclear weapons, given the behavior of the North and the erratic behavior of Mr. Trump, on which I want to comment. You asked that question earlier. Leadership requires constancy and predictability. You have to assure those who follow you that you are loyal to them, that you consider their interests, that what you have persuaded them to support you will continue unless and until it proves ineffectual, at which point there will be some consultative process by which you change the policy. If you are erratic, you may think, as Mr. Trump does, that unpredictability gives him leverage or strength. I think, on the contrary, it deprives him of support that he would otherwise have. So, final point, Mr. Putin is quite correct. The United States tore up the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty and is building IRBM, intermediate range and medium range missile systems. Russia has not deployed those as it could have. He's saying they will if they see American deployments. But I think he's also addressing the situation in Pacific Asia, because the justification that the Pentagon gave for wanting to get rid of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty was that they wanted to deploy such forces against China, which does have a full arsenal of intermediate nuclear weapons. So we're dealing now with a situation in terms of arms control, which is vastly more complicated. There are 9 de facto nuclear states. Some non-nuclear states like Iran have become very proficient in developing missiles and drones, even if they don't have a nuclear weapon. There was earlier an effort to restrict the proliferation of missile technology. That framework is clearly broken down. And we do face a much more complicated situation because now there are many actors, not just 2. During the bipolar order of the Cold War, you could sit down, Americans and Russians, Soviets could sit down and work out frameworks, which then would be respected by the rest of the world. That's not true anymore. So you need to have a multifaceted, multi-directional, multinodal, 3-dimensional, not 2-dimensional negotiation. That is vastly more complicated. And a sort of 3-dimensional chess. Chess is hard enough in 2 dimensions. So I think one has to be pessimistic about the prospect now that A, we have anything to build on. We've destroyed what we might have built on. And second, that we have the wisdom and the diplomatic agility necessary to construct a new set of frameworks which address the multiple actors now on the stage. I think this is very unlikely, unfortunately, and that is a loss for all of us, because it increases the likelihood of some sort of explosion into nuclear exchange, which would be fatal to whoever initiated it as well as whoever received it. You're muted again.
Noises here. That's why I'm just.
You got a bad habit developing a bit. That's okay. Go ahead.
We have the Biden administration. They have less than 60 days in Washington. And do you expect any sort of more escalations on their part in terms of the conflict in Ukraine, or this is the end of escalation? This Russian attack shows that you cannot escalate anymore. That would be devastating.
I think, as I said, I think the purpose is to prevent a decisive Ukrainian defeat before January 20th, when Mr. Trump inherits the problem. And so I don't think there is going to be, I think the Biden administration is concerned that Ukraine might be defeated in the next 60 days. But I don't think it will be. I think more likely we will see Ukraine begin a process, if it hasn't already done so clandestinely, of negotiation with Moscow. And here again, I have said before, I want to say this again. the notion that somehow the division of Ukraine along a demilitarized zone like that in Korea would solve Europe's security problems is not only nonsense, but very, very dangerous. Europe needs to have a broader peace. Ukraine could be the catalyst for that. That is, a negotiation that occurs between Ukraine and Russia will inevitably have to rest on what Ukraine agreed to at Istanbul, which is neutrality, a return to neutrality, no membership in NATO. Russia has never objected to Ukrainian membership in the European Union, although the European Union accession process would take decades probably, because Ukraine, contrary to what the former foreign minister implied, is no longer a democracy if it ever was one. And it has to become a government, a country with far lower levels of corruption, with more freedoms, with respect for its minorities, who are not just Russians, they're Hungarians and Romanians and others. It will take Ukraine a long time to make that evolution. So anyway, I think one obvious thing that is going to happen is the neutralization of Ukraine. Beyond that, I don't know. I mean, that should galvanize a broader discussion of European security to find what Mr. Putin demanded in December 2021, which is a security architecture for Europe in which both Russia and Western Europe can feel secure. And that the chances that that discussion will occur have gone up with the election of Mr. Trump because of his commitment to re-examine and restructure the American relationship with NATO. NATO, could be, if it were Europeanized, could be a vehicle for such a pan-European security architecture, with the United States perhaps obviously still a member because Europe and the United States are in a single geopolitical zone and have to have a relationship, but the United States in the background, not leading from the front lines, but from the rear, if we lead at all. So I think, there is hope in that the Ukraine war could end, not in the humiliation that the Biden administration clearly fears, but rather in a set of dialogues, talks, and negotiations that return Europe to peace.
On the other hand, as you've mentioned, it seems that Trump wants to put an end to the conflict in Ukraine, but we're witnessing the leaders in Europe who are not agreeing on the way that Donald Trump is trying to picture the conflict. Here is Ursula von der Leyen talking about the future, the policy of Europe toward Ukraine in the future.
Days ago, Russia tried to wipe Ukraine off the map. And for 1,000 days, Russia has failed because of Ukraine's resistance and the sacrifice of your heroes. Today is a day of mourning, but also a day of promise. We promise to keep standing by your side for as long as it takes. You can rest assured that European and Western support will continue to flow. The winter ahead may be scary, but it is in stormy days that true friends show up. And Europe is your true friend. Your freedom is our freedom, and our union is your home. Long live Europe.
It is very brave talk. I think underlining under the surface, European states, when they talk about when they oppose Mr. Trump on Ukraine, are really scared of a different issue. They are concerned about the possible retreat of the United States from a frontline position in Europe, because basically they have had a free ride. They have not had to spend what they would have spent on defense. They have not had to integrate their military-industrial base. They have not had to develop an effective European defense system because although the United States has repeatedly demanded that they do so, every time they fail to do so, we step forward and say, well, if you won't do it, we'll do it for you. So they have no incentive to address the issues that we are, I think, quite correctly posing to them. Why, almost 80 years after the end of World War II, is the United States still responsible for the defense of very wealthy, robust democracies in Europe? Is this actually, I would say, that our presence has been a stabilizing factor, but it has become now a destabilizing factor. And I think the Europeans fear the destabilization that would occur if Mr. Trump carried through on his promise to restructure the American relationship with Europe and with NATO. So that is the theme underlying the brave talk that Ms. van der Leyen just gave. And again, I think probably this reflects coordination with the Biden administration and is part of an effort to keep Ukraine in the fight until January 20th.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
Well, good to talk to you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.